Hello, Band World. Welcome to episode 7 of Things Band Directors Wish They Had Time to Teach. I'm Steve Bottom, your host, and I think I forgot to mention this last time, but I am a performing artist and educational clinician for Bach Trumpets. It is a division of the Conn-Selmer Corporation. And I'm filming this today, actually in my parents' backyard in my lovely hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. Dressed a little more formally this time. Actually, just finished a wedding gig. So let's pick up where we left off last time. We were talking about how to practice. Just to recap, I covered some of the basics. Divide the piece into at least two pieces, two sections. Depending on the length of the piece, you might want to go 3-4 sections. Start with the last section and then work your way back so that the end of the piece is as strong as the beginning of the piece. Because all too often, we play until we mess up, then we go back to the beginning, play till we mess up, etc. The end result of that is that often the beginning of the piece is noticeably stronger than the end, and this is a way to counter that so that they're equally as strong. The other thing I mentioned was breaking things down into just phrases or even a single bar, and in the past I've even broken things down as far as a single beat. Now granted, we're talking 16th, 32nd notes, but I've even broken things down to a single beat before. And of course, when you do that, you use a metronome. Even if you're using it at a slower tempo, you're still internalizing a steady beat. And so you can then, as you become more proficient on that section, up the tempo, and your reference is still that of a steady beat. Now, a couple of other things I wanted to cover why I'm making this 2 episodes is really I would have loved to have had today's technology available when I was playing. I started playing trumpet when I was 10 years old, 1982, and graduated high school in 1990, and all the time I'd be giving the advice, you need to record yourself. Well, at that time, that meant, a cassette tape, on my boom box. And of course, you play it back and it sounds horrible. It's not a representative tone at all. And that was just the affordable technology of the time. But even then, there were a lot of things you could take from that. You could tell if you were holding notes out to their full length. You could tell, if your time was steady, or, you were speeding up and slowing down. You could even tell intonation to a certain extent, even though it was not a good tone on the playback on that technology. You could tell if the tone altered, if it had been up or down, or etc. But now with the smartphone technology, and in fact the thing that I'm recording this on now, I guess is technically obsolete now. I think my contract is up in November, so I've had this iPhone 6 Plus for about 1.5 years, and I know they've come out with at least one model since then, which is supposedly better. If I could have had this type of representative playback technology, honestly, I would have recorded myself more often, because that brings me to one of my final points, is that we don't like to sound bad. And unfortunately, a lot of effective practice is letting yourself sound bad, because you want to play the stuff that you don't sound so good on so that you can improve it. Now, this was really big when I was in college. You had your practice room and people were walking by, and I know a lot of us, I wasn't the only one that did this. I would have my practice room show-off materials. And, I'd hear footsteps, and you spend so much time in music school, a lot of times you can identify who it is by their footsteps. So if it was someone, one of my bigger rivals, I'd hear him coming, and whatever I was working on, I'd pull out, something that was real flashy, and, I'd play it, just so I sounded good until they went by. That's fine for your ego, but it's not going to help you become a better player. And finally, I guess it was my sophomore year, I just embraced sounding bad when I practice, and trying to make my biggest weaknesses my strengths. That's when my teacher and I had kind of a meeting of the minds, so to speak. And he said, look, the stuff you do well, you do very, very well. He said, but, there are some of the players, with the least ability here that do some things better than you do because they happen to be your weaknesses, and I know you're not practicing those things. Well, he was right, he nailed it, busted. And I decided I didn't want to do that anymore, and I didn't want to disappoint him. So I started focusing my time on the things I did not do well. And, I'd get some joking, just kidding, not really. Yeah, just kidding, not really, remarks where people would hear me, sound bad, especially in my case, practicing low notes, trying to get those to speak consistently. And, but you know what? I didn't care. I just thought, all right, that's fine. Maybe they'll let their guard down and they won't practice quite as hard if they hear me sounding bad. Yeah, I was overly competitive in those days, and I freely admit it now. But yeah, you practice the things that you don't do so well, and you turn them into a strength. And ultimately, over time, I'm proud to say I did that. Now, my weaknesses are still my weaknesses, but unless you know my playing really well, you're probably not going to be able to tell. And even to this day, it's just more of a mental thing. I'm thinking, okay, I'm playing my weakness, but it doesn't really sound like a weakness anymore because I spent so much time on it. And I can break that down, what my particular weaknesses were other than low notes and how I fixed them in future episodes. But in the second half of this episode, I really wanted to urge upon you, and I know that, my kids have smartphones. Just about everybody has a smartphone now. And even if it's not capable of video, it's at least capable of audio, at a higher level than what I had back in the 80s. So by all means, record yourself. Even when you're doing run-throughs, record yourself video as well as audio, because you also want to see if when you're in performance, or in recital, if you're doing any weird mannerisms or standing weird or weird facial tics or whatever that's going to distract or maybe even make you look unintentionally comical. So I can tell you that if you bother to watch the series, then you're pretty serious about what you do. And if you're wondering, well, what if I watch the video and I don't know? Trust me, especially at first, you'll know. In fact, it'll even be cringeworthy. It's kind of like the first time you hear your voice played back on recording. You're like, oh, do I sound like that? It's the same thing when you play your instrument. But, embrace that. Realize, well, wow, if I can get it to sound just as good on this recording as, I think it sounds when I'm playing, then, I really have something here. And let that be your goal. In the last minute here, I want to do just a little bit of housekeeping again. I do this single take, non-editing, for a reason. Number one, it's just the amount of time and resources I really have to devote to this. But at the same time, I want to get the word out there. By the same token, I want it to be the next best thing to us actually having a lesson. Almost like we're sitting down and having a chat. My motivation for this was FDR. Back during the Depression and his fireside chats over the radio. This is our fireside trumpet chat, band chat. By the same token, watching the old episodes, I realized, that there's some dead air and some and hawing and whatnot. So from this point forward, I'm going to try to minimize those. And I think I'm going to script things out, at least where I have like a little note off to the side or something instead of doing this completely off the cuff. I think it'll make for a much more watchable product. So anyway, we're about 10 minutes and 15 seconds and counting, just a little bit over. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.